Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon for PC, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. This review is coming to you courtesy of Lord Chaos. He sent me this, so thank you. It is greatly appreciated. This is a first-person shooter and a sort of standalone expansion for Far Cry 3. It's kind of interesting because this game pretty much has nothing to do with Far Cry 3 apart from running in the same engine and having some gameplay similarities. Apart from that, it is not at all tied to Far Cry 3. In fact, again, it's a standalone game. You can buy this thing, even if you don't have Far Cry 3, you can still play it. And so, when we first heard about Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon, we thought it was just an April Fool's joke. Because that was when they really announced the info, and they put up this site for it that made it look like something from the 80s or the early 90s with really, really awful website. Completely corny. The whole premise seemed completely ridiculous. And then we found out they weren't joking. It's an actual game. So, the question there becomes, is it any good? Well, as far as the presentation goes, it's just phenomenal. You have the latest version of the Dunya engine running on this thing, and if you don't know what that powered, it also powered Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 2 in an earlier version. And so pretty much all the quality stuff that was in Far Cry 3 applies in Blood Dragon. You still have very, very high quality modeling and animation where the animations flow together really smoothly and fluidly. And the difference in Blood Dragon being that they're just ridiculous in a lot of ways. Like the healing animations, for instance. You take a blowtorch to your cybernetic arm or reconnect a wire, or you pull out a hand strengthener with your human hand and start using that, and it's just stuff like that becomes absurd. You know, spinning the magazine around your fingers before slapping it back into the phasertron, stuff like that. So you have a lot of really flashy animations going on with this, and you combine that with the rest of the visuals, where it has a very unique visual style, where everything has bright neon lights on it for no particular reason, and everything just looks like it was out of an 80s sci-fi movie. And so it just looks brilliant. And it really helps when you have all these lasers and everything shooting all over the place, really huge explosions, all sorts of stuff like that. And all the while, the game's actually running really, really well, which is particularly impressive because you have such a massive draw distance in this game. The environments in this game are huge, and there's pretty much no load times, and it runs really well. It's just an impressive feat. The only thing I really have against the graphics is that kind of odd red filter that they put over it. I don't know why they did that, but sometimes it makes it a bit hard to tell what things are when it's in the heavy brush and all that, so that can be a bit of a pain sometimes. But other than that, I don't really have any issues with the visuals. I don't even have any issues with that. It's sort of like a film grain effect, but it's not quite. It's the scan lines from basically what's a TV, and it's all made up to look like something out of the 80s, and it succeeds brilliantly. But it's not the impressive visuals that really drive the presentation forward. It's the sound design, which is absolutely fantastic. You have a brilliant soundtrack by Power Glove, and they basically took 80s music in general and just smashed it together, and this game has all of it. If you can find electronic music from the 80s and those classic 80s action movies and everything like that, it's pretty much in Blood Dragon, and it's brilliant. They even throw in some guitar stuff and the cheesy 80s montage music. Everything that you can think of from 80s music is in this thing, and it's just brilliant. It's actually really well done music too, so that really helps. And then you have the voice acting, which is it's a pretty much professional cast, particularly for your protagonist, who is played by Michael Biehn, and I really hope you guys know who that is. But he's always spouting one-liners that are just ridiculously corny, and they fit the game brilliantly. You can't help but smile when you play this game, and whenever you hear Sergeant Rex Power Colt saying anything, basically. Because pretty much everything that comes out of his mouth is incredibly cheesy and brilliant. And the rest of the cast does a phenomenal job as well. It's full of overacting it's brilliantly done. It makes you smile and you chuckle at it, rather than it just comes across as absurd or stupid, even though it is absurd and stupid to some degree. Anyway. And then you have the sound effects themselves, which are all really nice. Like laser guns sound lasery, and explosions sound really beefy and concussive and such like that. So all of this blends together to make a phenomenal presentation. But what really matter are the story and the gameplay, and the story in this can be summed up in two ways. The first way is, it's the year 2007, the future. You are the Mark IV Cyber Commando, Sergeant Rex Power Colt, and you're on a mission to take down Colonel Sloan and his rogue cyborg army, the Omega Force. And you're doing this for America! Or you could sum it up as every 80s action movie cliche possible, slapped into one game, and is absolutely fantastic. Seriously. That's what this game is. It's pretty much every 80s action movie cliche ever slapped into one game, and it is absolutely fantastic. The writing in this game is done in such a way where it's obvious they weren't taking it at all seriously, and it's absolutely hilarious as a result. You can't go through this game and not laugh at it, because it's just so silly and absurd at all times. You'll be running around and blasting the heads off of enemy cyborg commandos, and they'll be sitting there, and just their heads will explode, and Rex will just sit there and say something stupid like, "I headed them off," or something like that. You're just constantly making corny one-liners as you do everything. Everything is just so hilariously overdone that you can't help but find it amazing. Down to even the opening cutscene, like, you almost get injected with something by this doctor, but he's like, "No, Doc, I made a promise to a lady back home." "Your wife?" "No, Lady Liberty. She told me winners don't do drugs." Down to even stuff like that makes the game fantastically hilarious. And this occurs throughout the entirety of the game. Things even down to such simple things as, instead of throwing rocks to distract enemies, you're throwing D20s. Just because. Distract the enemy with your D20, nerd. Whenever you go to rescue people, they're always nerds, and they're spouting ridiculously nerdy things, or you're going out on these missions, and it's even making fun of the missions themselves. It makes fun of its own gameplay mechanics. It's like, yeah, this is a game, and it's going to break the fourth wall, and it's just going to be fun. And even down to things like the collectibles, which are VHS tapes and TV sets. Yes, some of you might not even know what a VHS is. You will be amazed, trust me, that they're fantastic. But you'll find these things, and you'll pick them up, and Rex will sit there and blurt out things like, "I hope I don't have to find any fucking feathers." And again, the entire time you're laughing. But that kind of leads me into the gameplay. What is the gameplay like? Because as hilarious as this game is, it has to be a good game if it's going to hold up. Well, you have Far Cry 3 to thank for really, really good gun handling mechanics. All of the weapons in this game have their own uses. They all feel different, and in certain respects, some of them feel more useful than others. Like, obviously the pistol's not going to feel too powerful, but it has a suppressor on it. So you can use it for stealthy things, like sneaking up behind an enemy and blasting him in the head before he knows what's going on. Everybody else is just kind of like, huh, what was that? You have the sniper rifle, which you can upgrade to be semi-automatic, and then shoot explosive bullets. Because! Or you can upgrade the Phasertron assault rifle to eventually shoot lasers. Again, just because. Or you can get the shotgun, which is like the shotgun from the Terminator 2 specifically. Also to mention, the pistol is the RoboCop gun. But, the shotgun, which you can eventually upgrade to become semi-automatic, even though it's a lever-action shotgun, and to fire just explosive rounds effectively. Oh, and it can have 4 barrels. Why? Again, just because. So, all of the weapons are completely absurd in this game, except for the one weapon that is pretty mundane, and that's the bow. And it even makes fun of the bow, because the bow has it's just bright neon lighty bow, and it describes itself as, it's a bow. If you don't know what a bow is, maybe you shouldn't be playing this game. And all the weapons handle differently, of course. And again, they each have their own uses. You can only have 4 at a time, but I found that the ones that it starts you off with, the pistol, the shotgun, the assault rifle, and the sniper rifle, are all the ones that you're going to be using throughout the rest of the game, basically. Until, of course, you get the minigun, because the minigun's just loads of fun, because you just hold the fire button down, and eventually he starts yelling. Just because. Gotta have a Rambo reference in there, can't you? I mean, seriously, you gotta have a Rambo reference. Anyway, so the gunplay actually feels really nice in the game, as does the stealth mechanics, where you'll sneak up behind an enemy, do a takedown, and if you're within range, you can chain that takedown by pressing a direction key. Or if you're playing it on console, you can do the directional thing with that. I don't know exactly how it works on console, but the takedowns actually flow together very nicely. You can do takedowns on just about every enemy in the game, actually. And you get basically 3 different types of takedowns. The first of them is just a melee takedown. The second is a shuriken takedown, where after you do a melee takedown, you can then pull out a shuriken and throw it at the other guy and take him out. Or you can do the gun takedown, which you have to actually level up for a bit. But once you hit a certain level, you can do a melee takedown on a guy, then whip out his pistol and blast the heads off of a few other guys. And that's only if they're within range and you can actually spot them and stuff like that. But it all flows together really nicely, and you get bonus points for doing takedowns and such like that. So it gives you incentive to play stealthily. But you can also just go in guns blazing if you want. You can really pretty much play this game however you want to play it, within a certain limit. I mean, it is a first-person shooter. What do you expect, right? Now, I mentioned a level-up system. You get cyber points for doing all sorts of different things in the game, like obviously killing enemies or completing objectives and such like that. And these level you up. Now, unlike in the original Far Cry 3, you have a static leveling system where it doesn't matter what you want to choose as far as your levels go. It's just going to level you up no matter what, and it's going to give you a bunch of bonuses that you'll just not really notice all that much for the most part. You do notice that you start off really badass, and then you become more badass over time, but it never really gets in the way. You never feel like you have to go off and do any grinding or anything to level up. So the side stuff is actually entirely optional. You can go do that if you want, but you do get a bunch of nice incentives to do it. Like for completing missions, you'll often get better unlocks for your guns. For instance, you'll be able to unlock things like the Phasertron getting laser rounds and stuff like that. And, of course, who doesn't want lasers in a 80s sci-fi action kind of thing, right? Lasers! Seriously, lasers! Anyway, the weapon upgrade system is pretty rudimentary, but it fits together pretty nicely with the missions, because it makes the missions not overstay their welcome. And it's kind of interesting because when you play through this game, obviously the story is pretty short. I mean, I completed it in about 2 hours. And I did all the side stuff in about 5 hours. So it wasn't really a long game. Particularly because you can sprint everywhere, and you're actually faster sprinting than when you're in vehicles and such like that. So, but it's not a particularly long game, and it really doesn't overstay its welcome. And all of the side missions are done in such a way where it never really detracts from the experience. You always have something to do, whether it be going and finding VHS tapes or TV sets or whatever, which is made pretty easy to do when you get scans of the map and such like that. Whether you want to just run all over the place and find all the various engagements between the nerds and the cyber commandos, and you'd be like, oh, well, I'm just going to go up to these cyber commandos and wipe them out, just because. Or if you want to do the story or these other missions, that's fine by the game. The game just lets you do that. And it doesn't really hold your hand. In fact, it makes fun of tutorials and such like that. With pretty much the best tutorial I've ever seen in any game, just because it's so fun. And when you put all of this stuff together, and you put it into this game, and you look at the fact that the game is definitely not charged at full price. It's a $15 game. And you combine all this stuff together. You look at this thing and you go, how could you not recommend it? It does have a few issues here and there. There are a few rough around the edges things. If it were longer, the structure of the game would overstay its welcome. If it were longer, then it would be a eventually tiring experience. Like, it would eventually get tedious, just because it would go on for a bit too long. But it's just long enough, and it's just the right price, where it ends up being an utterly fantastic experience. But the thing to take away from this is not so much that this is just a really good FPS that happens to be absolutely hilarious. It's that it's the first-person shooter that reminded me why I like first-person shooters in the first place. It's a really outstanding gem of the genre that nobody really expected to be great. But it turns out it is utterly fantastic and some of the most fun you can actually have in an FPS. And for people like me, where we've been disillusioned with the genre for quite a while now, because it's just been the same thing over and over again, the same modern military FPS over and over again. Not only is this a huge breath of fresh air, but it's just so incredibly fun that it reminds us why we like this genre in the first place. And for people who are coming into the genre, it explains to them why they should like it. And that's kind of the really interesting part of this game, because I actually struggled with what I wanted to give this thing as far as score goes. Because as much fun as I have with it, I had to ask myself the question, would this be something I recommend to everyone, rather than just FPS fans? Yes, it is. That was the conclusion I came to, and it took me a while to come to that conclusion. What does that mean? Well, it means that something's happening that hasn't happened in a really long time. I give Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon a 5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.